Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Gayle Carson. Welcome to Living Regret Free, a program that shows you how to live a better and more joyful life. As an added bonus, I invite you to listen to an introduction to my Mindset Matters program, which ties into this so well. Go to www.sobmindset.com. It's free, and I know you will enjoy it. If you'd like to contact me personally, drop me a line at gaylecarson13@gmail.com or go to my website, www.spunkyoldbroad.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter. My guest today is Rebecca Mountain. She's an international speaker, a best-selling author, a business consultant, and a certified high-performance coach, leading people through the transformation from the cycle of self-sabotage, fear and opportunity, blindness, to the joys of living as their best selves in their best lives forever. From a childhood of fear and isolation came the inevitable rupture, where Rebecca suddenly found herself at the ripe old age of 32, trying to figure out how to live in the real world as a single mother with no support, no friends, no job, and no street smarts on how to live like a normal person. It was time to uncover the real reason for that black cloud feeling and find the happiness and success she knew was inside her. And her book, Think Again, My 7-Stage Journey from Self-Sabotage to Success, is a #1 international bestseller in 6 countries. Well, Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I know you've been through a lot in your past, and I know you've gone through a lot to get where you are now. So how do you personally define success now that you've been through all of this?
Well, that one, the whole idea of success was something that really challenged me when I was a kid, because I was taught that being successful is actually sinful. It's actually a bad thing. It is vanity. It is not good. It is, and creates all these bad things. So I created this really terrible relationship with success. So what I've rehabilitated myself since then by doing is really trying to understand and read and learn about what success really means. And what I have learned now, and this is what I live every single day, is success is a series of micro contributions that you make every single day, each one leading you forward in big steps or small towards the life, business, and relationships that you want. And so I feel successful every single day because over time I've become very clear on what it is I really want, what really brings me joy and really makes me fulfilled. And as long as I take even the slightest step forward in my day towards that, that's a successful day.
So why do you think so many people sabotage their ability to be happy and successful? I mean, I know tons and tons of people who just, I don't know, they build these little things into these big traumas, and they're not traumas. I mean, it's something that we all deal with. So what and how do you deal with those people?
Most people, self-sabotage is a form of fear. So most of the reasons why we don't do what we're supposed to do is because for whatever reason we have created some sort of a fear around it. So it could be a fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of succeeding, right? So I've got a client right now, and she has set a sales goal for herself, and she refuses to hit it because if she hits it, what if she can't keep it going? And so by not hitting it, you never have to, quote unquote, fail. And yet all she does is end up feeling miserable. So what I have done for myself and what I help my clients do now, and what I'm hoping people get from the book, is to take a look at, okay, so say for instance, an example of a self-sabotage is quitting too soon, which is what a lot of people do. If I don't start something, if I don't start, I can't fail. And I can look at my life and say, well, I could have been great, and I could have been this, and I could have been that, but they use it as an excuse. So if you say, okay, like I was going to go do something, but I ended up not doing it. The question I like to ask is, what did you do instead? Because usually whatever you did instead starts that inner reflection on what's really going on. So, you didn't make that call. because, you're not because you aren't good at talking to people, but you didn't make that call because, well, you were afraid that someone on the other line was going to say no. And so the other sort of facet that I also like to help people with is that idea of not taking things personally. And if you go into the book, chapters 2 and 3 talk about stories and assumptions that we make about ourselves, like internally, or that dramas, like you were saying, that we create about other things, like they're not real. And yet we think them into a perceived existence. And so they become as if they are real. And you start pulling that apart going, okay, like, where is the proof of that? And what if you thought something different? And how would your life be different if you thought in this new way? And you get people to start visualizing, well, like, I would make those calls, or I would have those conversations, or I would do those things and accomplish these things that in my heart I really, really, really want to do. But for a whole host of fears and assumptions and negative stories we tell ourselves, we don't do. So it's a process that takes time. It's iterative. I'm always discovering sort of new little labels I have given myself that I need to eradicate in order to get the fullest extent of the joy I can out of each day.
It's really interesting because it's so hard for me to imagine not doing something because it might make me so successful that I could never reach that pinnacle again. It's almost like winning the Academy Award, and then everybody expects every other performance to be an Academy Award performance. And many of those people never really work again in a role that gives them that.
Yep.
And it's just, to me, it would be so frustrating. I can't even imagine that. Then again, the word limiting beliefs is such a word that's been coming up lately so often, and I don't know if it's because of what we're all going through to face all of these things that we have in front of us. But to me, these are all foreign things because, thank goodness, I was raised. I don't know. My mom was not an educated woman, but she was a smart woman. And she raised my sister and I. We just didn't know. We didn't know that we could fail. I mean, and if we did, well, that was a learning experience. Okay, now on to the next step. So,
Right.
In fact, when I started my speaking career, I called 100 meeting planners a day, if you can imagine. Now, this was the days when people answered their phone. So I called 100 people a day, and I didn't care who said no. I only cared who said yes. So it's a way of looking at something. So how do you change a self-limiting belief? How do you change someone who has all these doubts about themselves?
It's a process that actually starts with our thoughts. And I'm a huge neuroscience geek. I'm not trained in it or whatever. I read enough to be dangerous and to be completely in love with our brains and the malleability of our minds. So the first thing is to accept the fact that you can learn your way out of it. You can learn your way out of a limiting belief. You can learn your way out of the box. Like a fixed mindset, a limiting belief is like being in a box, but that the walls of that box are just made of paper, and yet we imagine them to be impenetrable. When really you just kind of stick your hand through it and oh, well, that's not so hard. So the first step is to say, I can learn my way out of this. And then the next part is you don't start at, a lot of people say, well, just believe in yourself. And it's not that hard and you can do this and you're smart enough and all this, but it doesn't really help somebody to figure out, well, how do you change a belief system? And the way you do that is you go right back to all the thoughts that go into your brain. So if you are consistently telling yourself negative things, like it could be, I'm not good enough, I'm too old, too young, not smart enough, too smart, I've heard that one too, and so whatever it is, like I have a bad memory, I'm inconsistent, I never finish anything. These are all different versions of limiting beliefs. When you say, okay, well, what's a different way for me to think that way? And in my book, I've got what's called the story changer chart. It's literally a process. You can look at it like a graph. I love stuff with steps. So what's your original belief? Where did it come from? Because if you can go to the original, what I call the original herd, the piece of the puzzle here is to not re-anchor yourself in that limiting way or that limiting story, which is what happened to me when I would always retell how I grew up. I would tell the story and then it would just be blank. Like, what do I do with this? I didn't feel any better in the telling. So what I did in this process is I'm like, okay, what do I no longer want to believe about myself? So I made my list. And for each one of them, I'm like, where did it come from? And then I look at that situation as if it's a movie and I'm not in it. So I take the emotion out of it and I look at what's really going on. And you look at, some of the people that judged me really harshly as I was a kid, and that was just the structure of the group I belonged to. They needed that judgment to keep us down so that we wouldn't leave. And you create that sense of you're safe here and you're not safe out there. And so when you take out that feeling that you have and you look at what's really going on, I'm like, okay, so say in that example, like someone is making me afraid. Their fear, in my new way of looking at it, must be so great that it is okay for them to impart that fear upon a child. And so instead of now having that fear-based reaction to that situation, I look at it and I go, and I feel sorry for them. I actually have compassion on the people who used to really frighten me as a child, because they would tell you stuff that if you leave the group, you'll die of cancer, you'll die in a car crash, and all these wonderful, fantastical things. And so, if not feeling that, going back to that original hurt and looking at that situation now, I can say, wow, like I can have compassion on that person. And because I flipped that emotion from something negative like anger, resentment, bitterness, whatever, into something positive, it's not like I'm absolving them like it was a terrible thing for them to have done, but I'm recognizing there's something else going on and it's not about me. It's actually about them. And I can have compassion on them for the magnitude of their fear and feel that I wish that I could help them overcome whatever ignorance they have or block they have to seeing, reality. But I don't feel badly about the situation anymore. And then right after that, like once you get rid of it, it's like a door of fresh air opening when you do that. And then you're like, okay, now what is the new thing I want to believe about myself? So they taught me that doing something different would be scary. A new one would be doing something new is exciting. And how would my life be different? So that's kind of a bit of a long answer to your question, but it's a bit of an iterative process that I go through.
Well, it's interesting because most people sabotage themselves. It's not coming from the outer world. Yeah, there are circumstances that happen and we all go through them, and life is not fair. We have to learn to deal with it. That's just called life, So what is the one thing you advise people to do right now to stop them from their own cycle of self-sabotage?
Really, it's to understand and be aware that they do this, and to start going through and saying, okay, I am no longer going to accept that I'm going to think this way, and then go through that process. What is it that I'm really afraid of? And it's hard sometimes to go back and look at that, but when you start really diving into what's driving you or what's preventing you or making you hesitate, and you go through that, okay, where did it come from? How can I think differently? And really imagining and visualizing how your life is different because you no longer think that way. Like that is, and it sounds so simple. It's like, well, you just have to think differently. The challenge becomes in reminding yourself to think differently. So I like to imagine our brains are full of these trenches, and these trenches are neural pathways, which is how we think. And I'm sure every neuroscientist is cringing at the moment at my very, very almost childlike description of brains. So but this is how I like to visualize things. So I'm a visual person. So we've got all these trenches in our brains, and our thoughts and beliefs are like circling around, and they take the path of least resistance. New beliefs, of course, now there's no trench. So we need our workers to move over from the trenches where they've been, digging and digging and digging, which is our original thoughts and self-limiting beliefs. And we need to dig them a new one. But as you can imagine, our brains are going to fight that. They're like, hey, no. This is easier. It's way easier to think this about yourself than to build a new thought process. So to create a new belief system, you just need to think your thoughts, these new thoughts, often enough. And that creates a new belief system. To tell someone believe in yourself is great, but they're like, and how do you do that? So then you say, well, you need to change your thoughts. Well, how do you do that? And so I like to give people practical tips. What I like to do is I like to write out on, I like these big Post-it notes, and sometimes I have little Post-it notes of words or phrases that really define what I want to be or think like that's different from my normal pattern. Because in order for the workers to start building the new trenches in our brains, we need to consistently push our thoughts in that direction. Now, our brains are made to fight us, and because it wants to protect us, and this is new, and this is maybe a bit frightening for our brains, so it always will try to shove us back into our old thoughts. But with more repetition and more practice, and with that level of consistency, those new trenches get built. And so the old ones are always going to be there, but the more we redirect our thoughts into this new way of thinking, and you think those often enough, we develop an entirely new belief system. And the beauty of a new belief system is that is what guides our actions. We cannot act counter to what we believe. So a lot of people start with, I'm going to be successful because I'm going to put my head down and I'm just going to bulldoze success into my life. But if their belief system is full of self-limiting thoughts, like, I'm not good enough, or I'll never make it, or I'm going to win an Oscar, and then everything has to be Oscar worthy, and can I keep that up, or like whatever. If those negative thoughts are burning around in their brain, at some point those actions that they're taking are going to lead to burnout. They're going to lead to frustration, to fatigue, to additional fears, and it's really what drives a lot of people's misery until that time where they're like, all right, something's got to give. And then you back the train out and say, okay, my belief system is kind of wonky. To change the belief system, you go back to your thoughts, and it's repetition and consistently pushing and believing in the fact that if you can change the way that you think, which will adjust your belief system, what you do next, how you should act, who you should be with, what your business should be like, the career move you should make, it presents itself. And for the people that I've worked with, just to go through this very simple process, looking at beliefs and habits and putting the two things together, they have doubled, tripled, quadrupled their businesses during the pandemic. And they didn't do anything exceptional, but they changed their whole belief and thought and habit systems. And they're like, we don't know why or how, because at the end, you can't really put your finger on what exactly.
Well, but the thing is that most people revert back to their first and natural behavior. They may have learned a new skill, they may have learned a new methodology, may have learned a new way of doing a better way, but when times get tough, most people revert back to their original habit. So living this new belief and living this new life and living this new pathway is not an easy thing to do. You really have to have mental fortitude to be able to do that. And your book, titled Think Again, I'm assuming that's where the title comes from, because you're telling people to think. And you've got your 7 stages. I don't know if you can tell us those stages in a succinct manner, because, we only have a limited amount of time, but maybe just give people an idea of what those stages are that they need to go through.
Sure. Yeah. And it'll be interesting, skipping to the end, the last stage is about preventing that fallback. So I'll get to that one. So the first stage is, like I've mentioned, to challenge the stories you tell yourself about yourself. So it's driving those self-limiting beliefs that you inflict upon yourself, that you've internalized over the years, you've come to believe to be true, but they do nothing but hold you back. So the first part is going through that story-changing methodology to start to move those in a new direction. The second stage then kind of comes out the same way, but from an assumption making perspective. So we make assumptions about other people. Oh, they're saying, well, I'm going to do this and then they're going to do that. I'm like, well, yes, no, we don't know. But creating drama that doesn't exist is another way that we use to hold ourselves back and give ourselves an excuse. And it's blame, which is worse because, whether it's true or not, it's outside of ourselves. So it can be an even more powerful way that we use to hold ourselves back. So again, like the story changer chart, there's an assumption changer chart to really challenge those made up dramas and futures that create massive anxiety, which in turn actually shrinks our brain, and we don't want that. So once those two, and they're big stages, and I find people go through those, they have like massive breakthroughs. But what happens
now we
next,
only have 5 minutes left, so we've got to get them all in.
Not a problem. I can summarize. Stage 3 is digging into your why. So it's your purpose, what really drives you every single day. Once you have that, then it's about the people around you. Having a support system to get you through this really helps in avoiding the fallback stuff. So you have people reminding you, hey, you're on the right path, you're doing the right thing. Stage 5, now we get into let's envision our future. So stage 5 is visualize how you want your life to be, your relationships and so on. Get a really clear view, because when you have that guides you to stage 6, which is taking aligned action, not just being busy for the sake of being busy, but driving towards your goal every single day. That's those micro contributions I was talking about. And of course, the last stage is how to stay the course. So all these different ways to not necessarily stop your momentum. Life happens, you may slow down, but someone who's really determined to learn can look at something as feedback, not failure. And that's how you prevent yourself from going back into old habits, because you refuse to accept anything as failure. It's all just a learning process.
Wow. Well, those are all great tips, Rebecca. Where can people find this? What is your website? I don't know if you have a special gift for anybody, but where can people find you? Where can they find this process? Where can they buy your book? All of those good things.
It's really easy. Go to thinkagainbook.com. You can get the book there. There's a whole bunch of freebies on that site. So in terms of gifts for the listeners, there's the story changer chart I was talking about, the assumption changer chart, a visualizer chart. I wanted to make it as accessible as possible for people to get that kind of help immediately and instantaneously and for free. So the book you can get free plus shipping. You just go to thinkagainbook.com. Of course, there's links to my website, which is my name, which makes it super easy, RebeccaMountain.ca. If you want some more information on the other kind of programs that I have built around this book and helping people get the life that they really want.
Well, I think you're the perfect person to help people who have been through this kind of trauma, because you were raised, in a way that most people are not. And to have broken out of that and to break the stigma of all of that has taken a lot of study and work on your part. And that's what I think people need to understand. She's given you 7 steps. They're not difficult steps. They're just steps, and you have to do them. But you have to do the work. And Rebecca did the work to break free from where she was. And that's the key. So if you want to find out how to deal with this, to get her book, it's thinkagainbook.com. And her website is actually her name, RebeccaMountain.ca, because I believe you're in Canada. And
I am.
And I want to remind everybody, if you want to get a look at my website, it's spunkyoldbroad.com. My courses are at sobuniversity.com. And if you're over 50, please join my Facebook group, the Virtual SOB Club. We have a lot of things going on there. I do a Facebook Live every Monday. So there's a lot there for you as well. Rebecca, this really has been, I think, very revealing. I don't talk to a lot of people who have been raised as you were. And I think, do we dare call it a cult? I mean, is that what it was?
It's
Um,
one definition short, but it was almost that. It just lacked a charismatic leader. Everything else was cultish.
yeah, and that is, I think, choose your leaders well, folks. Who
Mhm.
wherever you are and whatever you're doing, choose your leaders well and choose who you follow well. That's very, very important. So if you're in a situation where you feel someone is controlling you, or you feel that someone is leading you down the wrong path, go to Rebecca because she's been through this. She's going to be able to help you with this. And that first step, challenge your story, is so important. And look at what's going on around you and the assumptions that you've made. Big, big difference. So again, I want to say thinkyourbook.com. Lots of free stuff there. You can get a look at her book, so you'll have the stages. Her website is Rebecca Mountain, just like the mountain, .ca. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for being with us today. It was very revealing and a wonderful, wonderful message.
Thank you so much for having me. Really, really appreciate it.
Hi, this is Dr. Gayle, and I wanted you to know I have a whole bunch of other things to offer you. If you go to spunkyoldbroad.com, you will see an array of SOB stuff for sale and all our latest products and additions. If you're interested in getting on TV, I have a brand new course, Get on TV. And if you want to start your own business, you'll want my SOB Guide to Business Success. I know you'll love them all. I guarantee it.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's show. I choose my guests carefully, so if you have someone you'd like me to interview, please drop me a line at gaylecarson13@gmail.com. In the meantime, check out my intro program, Mindset Matters, at www.sobmindset.com. See you next week.